Everybody ready? Ready? All right. Welcome everybody. Sorry, we're just a couple of minutes behind. We're just doing some adjusting meetings in the time of COVID. We just had to get our technology in order. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Remind everybody to please silence your cell phones and that this board meeting is being live streamed. I'm Jason Dean, chairman of the Mississippi Board of Education, present in Jackson, Mississippi at Central High building, the building that headquarters this meeting of the Board of Education is being held today, Thursday, August 27, 2020 at 10 a.m. via teleconference and video means pursuant to Mississippi Code annotated section 25.4.5. Notice of this meeting was posted in accordance with state law and included the date, time, place, and purpose of the meeting and identified the location of the meeting available to the public. An audio recording is being made of this meeting and minutes of this meeting will be recorded. This meeting is also being live streamed. Dr. Perry Wright is present 6 feet away. Jackson to participate in this teleconference meeting. And now I'll move to announcement of quorum. As I call the names of the board members, please state your location and your presence. State the location of your presence for this meeting. Mrs. Alden.
I'm present at the boardroom, Jackson, Mississippi.
Miss
12 feet away.
Good thing we got a microphone. Miss Collins. Looks like you're muted. Let's see the red.
I could hear Ethan and Sean speaking.
Hello.
Yeah, if you look,
Hey,
we're on
it's
mute.
Karen Elam. I have no volume whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the three of us can hear each other, but when they switch to the room, it's very difficult.
Okay. All right. You want me to just stay down?
Okay, now I can hear it.
No, it wasn't. It was muted. Thanks, Jason.
Hey guys, can
Check. Comms check. You want me to hear us? Thumbs up.
No.
this is John Kelly. Can anybody hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you. Can you?
John,
I can hear you, John.
Yeah, we can hear you on this call, but we can't connect to the room for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not connected to the room either.
I tried to call Tamala and she's not answering.
I just talked to Sonia. I just talked to Sonia and she said they're working on it.
Okay.
Oh, that's so funny.
Sonia?
This is like who's on first?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hang up then. Just stand down. Okay,
Can we,
bye-bye.
okay, can I just ask
Okay,
a favor?
fine.
Can you stop live streaming until we get this squared away? Thank you.
I think the members in the room, all the phones have to be muted except the one that's speaking, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last thing we need is to be live streaming this debacle.
start
gonna
back over on the
start
roll
back
call.
over on the roll call. For the announcement of quorum, I'll call the names of the board members. Please state the location of your presence for this meeting. Mrs. Altman.
I'm present
I'm present at the boardroom in Jackson,
Ms.
Mississippi.
Collins.
Ms. Collins. I see her, but I don't know if she's muted or not. I'll come back. Dr. Elam.
Present, and I'm in Oxford, Mississippi.
Dr. Kelly.
Present, Gulfport, Mississippi.
Mr. Suggs.
Present, Blue Springs, Mississippi.
Mr. Jamil.
Present, Hernando, Mississippi.
All right. We'll mark Nancy present because I see her. So I think she's probably in two places. We'll have to come back. The quorum of the board is present at the location. Quorum of the board is present at the location stated for the purpose of conducting the meeting through teleconference or video means. August 27th,
2020 board meeting.
2020 board. Is now called to order at
10:13 a.m.
10:13 a.m. There you go. Now.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
And Franny,
We've all been in Zoom calls, a lot since March. Believe me, we're used to trying to work out the technical difficulties, so we apologize. But let's just restate that a quorum is present, and we're calling the meeting order at 10:13 a.m. I've asked Ms. Altman to lead us in invocation. I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Join me as I say the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands,
under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Join me in prayer, please. Our Father, we come today thanking you for another day of life. We thank you for the grace that we receive each day.
For today,
we just thank you for the opportunity to serve. We thank you for those people that are out
in the school
districts across the state, administrators and teachers who are doing the best that they can do under very difficult circumstances. We just pray that you'll give them strength and courage and mental and emotional stability to face the challenges that they're facing. And we pray for our students as they adapt to a new normal and as they go about their routines. And we just pray that eventually we'll be back to what we think is a normal school routine, and that our lives will go on as we are used to them going. But today, Lord, we also lift up our neighbors in Louisiana. In Texas, we just pray for their safety. We pray for strength for them, for we certainly can identify with what they're going through as we so vividly recall Katrina 15 years ago and the devastation that took place in our state. We just pray that they'll know that there's support there, that there will be people there to help them recover, and that while you can't recover personal and the special mementos, you certainly can move forward, and that there'll be people there to help them. We pray that you'll go with us as we go through this meeting, that we'll make decisions that will be beneficial to the children and the people across the state who work daily to make a difference in the lives of our children. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, next,
just keep in mind,
we've got folks on the phone, and there's a few of us here, so we're asking for promotions in seconds.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I need a approval of minutes of July 16th, 2020 budget meeting, and minutes of August 6th, 2020 special call teleconference meeting.
This is Sean, so moved.
John Kelly, I'll second.
There's a motion and a second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any opposed?
Motion carries.
Motion carries. I'm saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Motion carries, the agenda is adopted. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like to pull out for discussion? If so, I'll entertain a motion to do so now.
Don't see any.
Don't see any.
So that's,
We don't have to approve the agenda, since there's no changes to the consent agenda. We'll move to the report from the state.
All right, thank you. And good morning, welcome. I also want to just recognize, since this is our first meeting since Joe Goff, if you would stand, please. Joe is our new chief for advocacy and general counsel, and we're welcoming him to the meeting. So welcome, Joe, and we're glad to have you on board. So thanks for being here.
Welcome aboard, Jeff.
All right, we're going to start, Nathan Oakley, I'm going to ask you if you would provide an update to the board. There's some really neat resources that we have prepared for teachers. And I think this is, particularly at this time, I think it's going to be amazing. And so I just can't say enough about Nathan's team and the work that they put into this, because I think they're going to be incredibly pleased. And we're going to push that back out. I've asked Nathan yesterday to craft an email to the teachers listserv to lift this back up so that it's at the top of their inbox. So Nathan, I'm going to turn this over to you.
So board members are not with us in the room. Can you see the slides at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to spend a
few minutes with you this morning. There's three new resources that our team has developed that I will particularly want to highlight for you today. And these specifically align, as all the work that we do, aligns with our vision and mission and goals for the students across the state. The first of these that I want to share with you is a set of instructional planning guides that our team has put together. I'm not going to read names, but if whether you're on the board and you want to pull these down from the web, or if you're a teacher, I would encourage you, look inside the front covers of these documents. The team that has put this together has spent nights and weekends over the course of the summer with some tight timelines in the midst of everything else to pull these resources together. But a big thank you to all of the team that's been working on these. These instructional planning guides are really designed to provide assistance to teachers as they're planning lessons focused on critical content in each grade level. They're organized by term or by 9 weeks, if you will. We did not put restrictions on a number of days. We wanted to allow some flexibility for teachers, but give them a general broad guidance around how they might group or order standards. These are for teachers. These guides are grouped kind of by themes or units of study, and also consider the needs of different student groups. They are laid out in a way that identifies resources for consideration that connect back to high-quality materials and instruction and planning, the Standards for Mathematical Practice on the math side, as well as assessment and fluency and PD. There's all kinds of pieces embedded within this content. They are out right now in draft format on the website. We've put them out pre-release draft format, taking feedback from teachers, and we'll make tweaks to those as we go forward to make them stronger. Presently, we have these available for English language arts and mathematics and science, and we're working on a set of these for social studies to be released as well. We're going to look first at the English language arts piece of these instructional planning guides. For ELA by grade band, you can take the top 4th and 5th grade and put it together. A lot of the content is cyclic in nature and kind of incremental from one grade to the next, so we've developed these in groupings. We've identified priority standards that might be addressed within a particular unit or theme. And then we've grouped the related standards underneath there. And you can see on the left, 4th grade, on the right, the 5th grade. Those are writing and reading for information, speaking and listening standards. And then we've got recommended instructional practices that teachers might use to address these standards. So particularly in ELA, standards are not meant to be taught in isolation. And so it makes sense to group these instructionally. As we look at mathematics, just quickly, this is an excerpt from Algebra 1. You can see at the top there, they're grouped a little bit differently on the math and the ELA side. We knew that the content was designed differently, and so the organization of the document needs to be different. On the left side, you can see here that we've got groupings by unit as well as by real-world application in that first column on the left. Then in the second column, you can see the corresponding college career readiness standard, and the highlighted section of that is the specific skills that are being introduced or focused on in that given unit. And then finally, we've got teacher tips
for the mathematics content, the bottom list there. That are just quick pointers that might be helpful to them to consider. This one mentions ACT that's coming up in junior year. The third column includes the standards for mathematical practice that are embedded throughout our math content across grade levels. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have key vocabulary terms or academic vocabulary that students need to know as a part of the instruction connected to that standard. When we look at science and the content there, this one, similarly structured, is for kindergarten. You can see down the left-hand side, they are grouped into units of study that include real-world connections for science. We also have included cross-cutting practices and standards, and that standards are in the second column, the cross-cutting practices and concepts are in that first column. And again, this lays out, and this is a term 2, second 9 weeks grouping, but these are laid out across all 4 terms for each content area for teachers to be able to reference going forward. Finally, on science, again, vocabulary terms, core academic vocabulary is there to the right. The second resource that we want to highlight for you is our equipped book list. Again, a broad team from across the agency has put this together. We've had a kind of a text exemplar list as an agency in the past, but we felt like it was time to revisit that. As new titles are released, as we look at the work we're doing to address the needs of specific student groups, as we're looking at what we're doing to ensure that students can see authors and read stories about students that look like them and students that are coming from similar backgrounds as them. We did a thorough review of available text and used a number of public resources and websites to put this together. But this equipped book list is really to help teachers consider what anchor text they might want to use within a reading classroom. It's designed to give them content that they might be able to link onto or that might drive meaningful classroom conversations. These are, again, addressing individuals, characters, and authors from different cultures and backgrounds. These books were not chosen at random. There were specific criteria that were put together in a rubric developed by the team to develop this. And the team that put this rubric together and then just conducted this review included a librarian and some literacy personnel, college professor, a high school English teacher. And they used resources such as The Novelist and We Need Diverse Books, Common Sense Media, to help identify potential titles. And many of these titles that we're going to see on this list for grade 5, 12, and subsequently down the road for K4 are on different lists that have been awarded for the quality of the content. So a quick screenshot here. If you check these resources out on the website, they are page after page of very engaging graphical and meaningful content. We've got the title, cover picture of the book, the title of the book, as well as the type of text, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, the grade level that it falls into. And then as you look across the bottom, the Lexile level deals with the complexity of the text that's in that book. There's a short description there and a page count, and then you see the little logos or emblems at the bottom right in purple. And there's a legend on the right. You can tell if that book is an award winner or if it's available in different languages, if there are curriculum connections to different content areas, or to social studies or STEM or STEAM, including arts. And then also if there's a digital format available. So again, these are broken down by grade level. We have them for 5th through 12th grade now, and we're going back and adding them for grades K through 4 down the road. There are also a number of tools and resources on that website that allow for teachers and students to look at the content, to dig in and look at potential pairings of books, to look at checklists for how they might study these materials. There are approval forms that teachers might use as they assign these out for students. There's an evaluation form that schools can use as they evaluate what's in their library or their collection. And just a number of other resources there for teachers to be able to use across the state. And then going forward, as I mentioned, we have these available for K5 right now. We'll be adding K4 going into the fall. And then we're also putting together a webinar series that can help teachers understand how to better use these materials, and then compiling a list of short stories and poems and other materials that may be useful to help teachers as they put these texts into classrooms. Finally, I wanted to lift up to you some additional work that's been particular interest to me as a former band director, music teacher, but also to our art teachers across the state. Our team within the agency has put together some recommendations for arts education And this is really practical guidance that school administrators and arts educators might be able to tap into as they're trying to design classroom instruction during a pandemic. And it addresses classroom sanitation, classroom layout, safety protocols, how they might redesign scheduling and create opportunities for small ensembles, other kinds of instructional designs. This is broken down into different arts categories. The piece you see here on the screen is from the dance category, but it addresses kind of across the different arts components. How teachers might lay their room out, provide sanitizer, provide distance within a classroom structure or classroom setting. I've seen a number of schools that are offering art classes, certainly going into the fall, but trying to do it in a little bit different way to ensure the safety of their students, but still create a meaningful arts experience for them that's so critical to the social emotional well-being of our kids in school. So I will pause there and be glad to take any questions from the board.
Questions from anybody participating by video conference?
Yeah, I would just like to start by saying this is outstanding. Just a quick question for me. You mentioned that digital books are available. What percentage would you say they would be able to access digitally? Because I think that's going to be a very important thing to do.
I don't have a hard count on what is currently in that list that's digital, but I can tell you that we're working on another project within the agency. We're not quite ready to launch it yet. We are trying to find some digital book collection solutions that are cost effective for school libraries across the state.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? Thank you, Dr. Oakley.
Thanks, Nick. And John Craman, I want you to just give the board a brief update on where we are with the implementation of the digital learning plan. John and his team have been doing an amazing job at getting this all pushed through and working with vendors. So if you
That's in statute. They will need to submit to us their application, their digital learning plan, and there are 3 pieces to that, as well as their assurance document, which I'm going to come back to in a minute. Our goal is then for them to have all their orders placed, the POs issued by September 11th. Our deadline in our vendor contracts is November 20th for all devices to be delivered. And right now, we've been talking quite a bit, my team and I just point out that John Hartley and Josh Huey have been working with me around the clock. I know that John Hartley and I checked out after midnight last night, and Josh was here on the job at 6:30 this morning, grinding it out every day in and day out. It's a full-time job for sure. But we know that today, as we talk to different districts over the last few days or the last week or so, that there are a number of questions that have come up that relate to what they need to take to their boards to get approval before they submit. There's a number of board meetings today and tomorrow, and looking for signatures, getting assurances done, so they've got a number of questions. So the second thing I'd like to say then is, of course, that we want everyone to get their applications in before the deadline. And so part of what we've been working on and what we've been rolling out over the next 24 hours is going to be some information to them to help them clear up some of the confusion and some of the kind of the questions that they've had about the plan. So the first thing I would say is that on the assurances side, there were some questions that came up that we've clarified, and we'll be posting that on a new website today and circulating to them by email and talking with them tomorrow on the webinar. And those relate to 3 topics, 3 key topics in the assurances. The first topic is this question of sustainability. There's been an anxiety among a number of districts about the commitment that they feel that they will need to make to replace every device in the size of this program in 3 years. And what we want to clear up and make sure that they're aware of is that what we're really asking for them to do is engage in a dialogue with us over the next 3 years to see what's working, what needs to be fixed, and how to sustain the pieces that are essential of high quality to the students, including the opportunity, say, to take classes or to take courses or content that is not available in their district because of just the limitations of a small district in maybe a rural part of the state. Obviously, our children want to be back in school, right? Little kids learning to read want to be with their teachers in class. Football players and marching band members want to be back on the field, as soon as possible. So We are not trying to advocate for or push districts to think about committing themselves 3 years out without funding lined up to sustain this issue in terms of one-to-one for every student, for every kid across the state. We want to work with them over the next several years to see what we need to sustain and move forward. And our assurance is simply ask if they engage in a dialogue with us and provide us with information to help them with that sustainability. So that's a key point that I don't think we can emphasize enough, and we'll talk about that again with them by email and on the webinar tomorrow with the districts. The second assurance that came up is 11C related to professional development. We stated what we thought might be best practice, but Dr. Wright and her wisdom has kind of guided us to soften that to the point where we're just simply asking them to clarify how they are going to get whatever they feel is an appropriate level of trainers trained up inside of their district. And so that's something that we've clarified. And so that's a change to the assurances that they'll see when they get us up on the website and when we email it out to them and when we talk tomorrow on the webinar. The third issue with the assurances that has caused some confusion is we mentioned about completing the orders or the purchase of the devices. What we meant was the issuing of the purchase orders by September 11th, not the complete cycle of the delivery of the devices, which we know, as I mentioned a moment ago, will be arriving by November 20th. So those are three things we want to clarify. The second thing that we're going to talk with them about tomorrow is that we are running through the final allocations. I believe we'll be talking later in this meeting about some relief or some assistance that we are going to provide to some of the districts that will cause us to reissue the allocations tonight for them to have to review tomorrow, and we'll be talking through what those changes were when we talk with them tomorrow. We will also be adding in the connectivity allotment or grants that are coming out of HB 1788, which we'll be talking about again in the future here. So the webinars tomorrow, we're going to talk about where we are with regard to the all these different pieces, give a last chance to address any questions that they may have with regard to this program so that they can get their applications in, they can complete the assurances, and they can get their digital learning plans all together. So we're very excited about making sure that they have all the information they need and seeing the applications come in. We have reviewed to date 17 applications. I believe after today's local board meetings and tomorrow's local board meetings, we'll see a flurry of them coming in, and then of course over the weekend into Monday and then again Tuesday. And we're hoping that all 150 do apply. The one thing I mentioned is that we're putting up a new webpage today. It'll be ready to go before this meeting is over, and it's going to have all this information on there, as well as the new assurances revisions, as well as the registration link for the webinar tomorrow. One thing that I think would just also point out is that, as we've heard from districts, one thing that I thought was very interesting to us was a district, we got an urgent emergency email from a district yesterday because they discovered that their vendor that they had pre-purchased before our EPL was in place had a purchase order in for a number of devices, and they were notified that the vendor did not believe they could get the supply chain to deliver those units to them in time, so they would, in order to be reimbursed. So we were very excited that based on the strength of our contracts, our approach, our vendors, that we were able to accommodate that urgent request, and we were able to provide relief to that district that was worried that the vendor that they had contracted with outside of our program, once they heard the news, that they were able to come and talk with us about it. So we were very excited that the strength of our partnerships, the strength of our program, the strength of our contracts, and the strength of the supply chain efforts that we're putting in is paying off and will continue to pay off in the districts. And as I talked to Dr. Wright about, I probably 3 or 4 times a day on one of the vice presidents at CDWG, talking through, again, looking at the supply chain, trying to make sure that we are tending to the logistics that are essential to this program being a success. So I'm happy to answer any questions or see if there's anything else you guys need us to work on.
Yeah, so this is going to generate some discussion. So I'll just maybe have some opening remarks and then ask the board members to weigh in. Just some clarification. Tell me about House Bill 1788 and where we are with the implementation on that, and then we'll come back to the learning plan.
So we have been working on the data model to distribute the funds, the $50 million from HB 1788 for connectivity. We are looking at what the law starts us. Our starting point is the unserved areas of the state based on census tract data. We've converted all the information we have from ourselves and the Choctaw Nation, as well as some basic information about the private schools that are also referenced in the law, to see where they are unserved. We are then mapping that data against the low-income data we have in the state, because the 2 reasons you don't get connected to the internet is either it's not available in your area or you don't have the funds to cover the cost of that. So we are putting the finishing touches this afternoon on that model, and we will have the allocations ready to go. So I mentioned earlier that we are putting forward the new allocations based on what we discussed here at this meeting today. we'll be adding into that the HB 1788 allocation as well. So they'll have that information, by the end of the day.
Okay. And the law requires that allocation to be based in unserved broadband access areas.
And it is a direct grant to the districts. There's no application required. We only ask in the assurances and in their digital learning plan that they account for how they're going to address. And from the programs, from the plans we've heard from districts, most of what we're hearing is that they're finding ways to strengthen their Wi-Fi signals and or trying to find ways to get digital information to students and make exchanges rather than overcome the barriers of logistics of getting live, robust, on-time, real-time internet connection to all homes in their districts.
Okay, back to Senate Bill 3044. When is the application deadline for districts to submit their purchase orders?
Close the business. Oh, sorry, purchase orders?
Well, application and then purchase orders.
The application to us is September 1st. Close the business.
What day is that?
Tuesday.
Okay, so they're applying, saying, okay, we now understand the rules of the game. This is how many we want. This is how much it's going to cost. But we're applying, so that's it. Okay. And then the purchase orders would then there would be a due date for purchase orders.
Yeah. So then we're going to spend the next several days into Labor Day weekend approving all those plans. And then once they're approved, they can place their order. And the deadline that we've asked them to place their orders by is September 11th, which is Friday. Close of business on September 11th, a week from.
I want to know on September 1st how many districts applied, and I'm pulling for 152, but and just an email, 100.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, that's important because I'd like to know. I know that we're going to get into this. Just prepare yourself. There's a lot of districts who have a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we're answering all the questions that we can. I know that we are, but that they don't choose to not participate because they're confused or some sort of issue out there. It's interesting about the vendor that was previously contracted with, not on the EPL, and the district saying that they can't deliver by the November. There's another question. November 1st is when the money has to be obligated, which we're meeting. Do you think by November 20th, that's the date where all of the devices would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the statute, it says if any of the funds are unobligated, they fold into our ESSER's pot of money. Prior to that, after the September 11th cutoff, right, for the orders, we're going to then look back and see, we'll do it a couple times. Once after the September 1st to see who has not applied, right, because we may then have funds that we need to reallocate. Then when all the orders are placed and we see kind of what the balances are, we'll keep rebalancing the account. The final step ultimately is going to be at the end of December, when any funds that aren't obligated will be swept back into the unemployment benefit fund. But prior to that, on November 1st, the law gives us the opportunity to move any unobligated funds into our ESSER's pot, right? And we could spend it then from that through.
So the really important question is, you think by November 20th the devices will be delivered?
Yeah. So again, appreciate that question as well. So when we put the applications out or called for proposals or quotations and plans from the vendors, we asked them to give us a week-by-week running tally of the devices they would be able to take possession of and then deliver to the schools in Mississippi. And we cut all that off at November 20th. And so we can see, and when the districts go and contact the vendors to place their orders, they'll be able to communicate with them about the kind of time frame. So I want that particular SKU, or I see this price, or I want that delivery date, and they're going to kind of weigh those three factors because they will have multiple SKUs available to them on the Windows laptops and on the Chromebooks. So they'll be able to see, I want that particular brand or that particular SKU. Okay, this is that time frame and availability for that, and here's the price. So, but they can play around with that and figure out, well, I want that different SKU but a better price, or I'll move up the timeline, so forth. But that's all going to be played out with the vendor, and the prices are all very close. But there are differences between them, and we've given them already an average price across all the units, so they know what that price roughly is.
This question came up on Monday. We were briefing some of the legislators, the chairs of the ed committees. The question was asked. I want to make sure I get it for the record. As the devices are delivered here, what's our methodology for distributing it to the districts?
So first of all, the districts are ordering them directly, but there will be a central supply depot set up in the state and run through one of the subcontractors through CDWG. So the devices will come in, they will test the product, they will put the case on, they'll make sure all the taggings, everything's in place. They will distribute it based on a plan that is mapped out through the vendor to the district to make the arrangement. So they're going to be assessing the site readiness, meaning what are the logistics of the site? Do I need to know what kind of truck I can bring into your property? I want to know whether I need a lift. I need to know what time you guys are going to be there to receive it. I need to know where the devices get delivered to the building, so that everything can kind of run smoothly on the delivery side. So the last mile, so to speak, of this is that once they're here and they're all, the devices are tested, set up, packaged together with all the cases and so forth, and then it'll work through a logistical time frame that's been worked out between the vendor and the districts.
But critically, when all else is equal and everything's, set up and ready to go, it's first come, first served, in the sense that as you receive the purchase orders, there's several thousands of devices that come in. We're not just arbitrarily picking it. We have a system in which.
Yeah, we want each district to get, it will be first come, first serve. We do want to work with each district, but the faster they're moving, the faster we get it set up.
That's the point I'm trying to make here for those that are listening online. Get your applications in because and purchase orders, because that's going to drive who gets it first. If you're last in line, you're going to be the last ones to get it. I mean, right. And trying to manage logistics, and that's a pretty fair way.
Yeah. So the very last district to go will have whittled down to the last set of devices, the last price, and the last delivery date.
By November 20th. I'm sure we've all talked to lots and lots of superintendents and other education leaders over the last weeks, and one of the things that I've heard over and over again was this attitude, like, we're not expecting to get this until the spring. And I just think that's just such a shame, because we're working extremely diligently, and the staff and I have been in constant communication. I've attended meetings. I'm just putting a number on there, 60 hours a week for 3 months is probably more, but that's not an exaggeration. And so that's where I want to kind of turn and bring up the back and forth we've had this week with not only the state auditor, which I'll get into, but also we're called on Monday to kind of explain the process and with our friends at the Capitol, the legislative leadership, not only the chairman of the House and Senate Education Committee, but other folks were there from the governor's office, and other senators were present, and representatives. And I thought that we did a great job in answering the questions, and seemingly satisfied what their questions were. The nature of the questions were particularly around the EPL, the Express Product List, which we voted on earlier, I think it was August 6th, right? Mm-hmm. For the approval of CDWG and Apple through a competitive award to CDWG. 4 proposals were submitted, and an outside selection committee chose them. So there was a lot of questions, particularly around guidance that the department were giving to districts about whether or not they can purchase products outside of the EPL. And I'm going to get into this. I'll just be insane. I understand this, I think, pretty well. It certainly was initially an evolving conversation, given we had talked to districts initially about what their needs were. And then the law was written, and it was based on not need, but ADM. So we went back several times, updated what the amount of dollars would be distributed to the districts. And there were some variants from beginning to end because of the change from needs to ADM. And ultimately, as we were reading the law and creating the EPL, and having multiple webinars with superintendents and district technology leaders, messaging, was being developed, in real time. And I think that we kind of got crossways with some of our communication with the auditor's office. Specifically, someone had an ongoing conversation on August the 5th with the auditor and said, devices have to be bought off the EPL. That's not what the law says. And on August 25th, August 20th, the last webinar, there was an update, and I know it by heart. Slide 7 says, hey, if you want to buy off the EPL, you can, and you have to meet or exceed the criteria that are listed on slides 11 through 14, and it has to be a lower price. So for those of you who are listening and going through this application process, you can buy off the EPL. You can buy outside of the EPL, I should say, if you can show that your product meets the technical specifications outlined in the the latest distance learning plan on slides 11 through 14, which you all have, and it's a lower price. You can. We've never deviated from, from that. So I just want to make that point excruciatingly clear. Now, the comment that you made earlier, I think, is illustrative of the challenges with that. So there was a district who has contracted with a vendor not on the EPL, so not CDWG or Apple, and they contracted and they said, we are not able to promise delivery by the date in which you can get your reimbursement, right? So, that's a cautionary tale. So if anybody's, intending to do that, it's free market, go for it. But if you don't meet the deadline, you're not going to get the 80% match. I mean, right? That's as clear as I can make it. So I think it was unfortunate, is the word I'll use, that the state auditor, without sort of, confirming the facts of the development of our implementation of this, sent letters not only to the governor and lieutenant governor and speaker, who we've been talking to every week, multiple times a week. I just told you we talked to them again on Monday. That's okay. We feel very comfortable in that they understand, our position on this. But it's also sent out to all the superintendents, and I think that's what's really concerning, because now, on top of all the work that's been done for 3 months, every day, weekends, nights, holidays, to get this done in a very admirable way to deploy 310,000 devices into the state the size of Mississippi by November in a 5-month time frame from the time the law was passed on the 1st of July. I mean, it's, few businesses that I can think of could do that from scratch. So, I mean, the fact that the department's doing it and doing it, extremely well and competently needs to be 100% affirmed. And, superintendents certainly have questions. We're working diligently as we possibly can to answer every single one of them. We all handle in phone calls. Statements of insurance has come up. You just addressed that. The buying off the EPL, I just addressed that. So, so let me I'll come to a conclusion here. Here's the point I want to make. I feel confident that was just a miscommunication, and it was unfortunate that it got to be, a public issue and didn't have to be. A phone call to Dr. Wright could have clarified that. Like, actually, that might have been said initially, but here's how we're executing the law, period. I mean, we've said this, so that should have ended that. But I've been, I started Jackson Public Schools in 1979, so I've been around Mississippi education a long time. And there's always this spirit of, like, people sitting on the sideline, putting popcorn in their mouth, waiting for you to fail. And it's just so, demoralizing when you see very competent people who I'm talking to every single day doing a fantastic job. I mean, an incredible job. And then you have people just sitting there, just saying, oh, I can't wait for them to fail. They're so incompetent. No, we're going to succeed in this. And furthermore, this is a major step forward for education in Mississippi on the lines of the textbook program from 50 years ago, or the 20 years ago, putting a computer in every classroom, or we're putting a computer in every child's hand. I mean, this is a big deal. So, it would be nice for political leadership and others to get behind this. Are there issues to overcome? Absolutely. We're not ignoring that. We know that there's issues to overcome. This is a big deal. But instead of just sitting, waiting for failure, I mean, I'd love it if people got excited about this and say, hey, by November 20th, there's going to be 300,000 plus devices in kids' hands. We know we've got professional development to do after that. We know all that stuff. We're not oblivious to that. But then we go through the professional development, then think about what the application is for kids across the state who now have access to education on an even ground. I think that's an amazing thing that's happening. And there's going to be some growing pains. We acknowledge that. We're working on it. We're not ignoring it. We're working through it. We're not incompetent. It's going to happen, and it's going to be successful. So I'll turn it over to see if there's any questions for John. But this is just like, it's gotten a little, this is something that's going to be amazing for our state. We should be excited about it. So, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, John Kelly. I think you've answered all of my questions, and I hope you have for the superintendents as well. Appreciate everybody's leadership on this. This is an amazing time in education for Mississippi. In my lifetime, other than integration of schools, I don't know anything else that's been any more exciting than this in terms of the broad reach that it's going to have on public education, particularly in those areas that tend to have been neglected in the past. So thank all of you for your leadership, Dr. Wright, John, all of you who've been involved in this initiative for having done the heavy lifting on it. I would just say this, everything you go into of this magnitude, you're gonna have naysayers. You know, being in city government, we get that every day. You have to just learn to overlook that and keep your head down and do the hard work. That's the way you get beyond that. I would hope that every school district in this state is gonna apply for these devices. I'm gonna be extremely disappointed if we don't have 100% participation. My question is this: do we have any inkling that there is a single school district in the state that is not interested, or you have heard that they have doubts about applying for it, whether you've heard that directly from the school district or through some back channel? I'm not interested in the name of the school district, not wanting to call anybody out, but I would like to know that, have you heard anything about any school district not applying for these devices?
John?
I've heard a couple of districts that are anxious about some of the assurances and sort of what the commitments will look like, and we hopefully that we're confident that the corrections or the clarifications we're making today will help assuage those concerns and then free them up. I believe that all districts are trying to be responsible with their finances and try to figure out from a reimbursement perspective whether they have the money up front. This is a difficult time of year from their financial perspective. But I believe that they are working through those challenges, and I think the conversation we're going to have later in this meeting today will help alleviate some of that pressure on the district. So I don't believe that I've heard any reason for somebody not to apply, but we have heard concerns that we're going to try to address them as we go.
Two statements to follow that up. One is, what I hear is the concern around the statements of assurances, which John addressed in his initial comments, that's being discussed, and where we can be flexible, we will be, but where we're protecting the accountability of the taxpayers' money, we can't be. So there's that. The second one is a little more complex, and that is because of the evolving of the needs with the money and the variance between the money that was initially thought that districts would receive and the money that was actually going to be appropriated based on ADM. We have gone back and forth with the district saying, amend your numbers, amend your numbers, amend your numbers. As a result, the numbers went up because some had more, some had less. So, but those that had more increased the number. The matches, the match for the local districts would go up from 20% if more was ordered than what the money was available. And so I think some of those districts started looking at the math and going, where am I going to come up with this money? And to me, that's really where the rubber hits the road. Like, if you can't afford this, maybe, order less or still participate what you can afford. But along the way, every single step of the way, we were saying, we're about to sign this contract. You have to tell us how many that you want. And then before we signed the contract, we had that number set. And so as districts are trying to scramble to understand, how to pay for that, remember, you told us how many you wanted, and that's how many we ordered, right? Okay. Other questions? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Altman.
Oh, somebody else was fixing to speak. I think you covered the issues very well, and this is such an exciting time in our state, as you've pointed out. But it's also everybody's plowing new ground, and it's almost a learn as you go project. And kudos to the legislature for stepping up, and all the good things that have gone on in the last a few years, and the progress that's been made. We ought to all be cheering. We ought to all be doing what we can do to promote what's good for our boys and girls. And the gotcha attitude just doesn't have a place right now because there's too many people working. I can tell you, because I know the lights are on in this office when everything else is dark downtown. the lights are on at MDE because we're getting emails at 11 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning and various times because people are working. And that's what it's going to take to make this work. So I just think we've all got to get in line. Everybody support. Everybody here knows what state law is. People sitting around this board have worked under state purchasing laws. Some of them still do. So, you know, it's discouraging when we can't all be on the same team. And I think, you know, I think people are understanding that good things are happening and we're going to plow forward regardless.
Hey, I've got a quick question. I agree with all the comments that were made, by the way, and I apologize, but I have a in the weeds question for John. I have a question for you. Once the devices are distributed to the districts, what's the technical support for them look like?
So that's a great question. So I'd say there's probably three parts to that answer. The first is that we are supporting, prior to the delivery of the devices, engineering support from a sense of getting the software that is essential to the operation of the devices loaded onto them, the filters, the mobile device management. So we're getting licenses and loading the software. And that a part of that will mean working with the districts to get all those devices pre-enrolled, and then when they get assigned to the students can log in and use them. That's one. The second thing from a technical side is that there are several moving pieces within the contract. One of them is if the device either fails due to some problem with the device or is damaged or broken in any way, then we have 24-hour on-site break fix to arrive at the school to collect the device, replace it with a hot swap, take the device, get it fixed, and bring it back either or fixed or replaced over the course of the 3 years of this program. So that's the second piece. The third piece is that we are also working in terms of training, professional development, and that's going to come from both the contracts that we have with the vendors, both Apple and CDWG, as well as Dr. Wright's commitment on the part of MDE to provide additional coaches and supports that will cover professional development for teachers who are working in a digital environment for the first time, support for sort of bolstering the end user support to make sure that people can use the devices, the hardware, the software, and so forth. And then also to be able to provide additional engineering support to the network teams at the district level to make sure that the systems can stay connected and working. So it's a pretty robust approach, and we learn from a lot of past efforts to see where districts who are short on resources struggle with sort of large deployments like this. So we've designed this program to be able to supply all of the necessary supports to keep everybody moving forward so that there's no unnecessary disruption to the students learning or the teachers teaching.
With the state
Very good.
Sorry, Sean. With the state superintendent's discretionary fund for PD, will that be competed, or is there some other methodology? Are you going to distribute that on an equal basis to districts to do their own?
The biggest part of that is actually getting bodies in the state that work for us, through us, to be able to provide direct support to the schools. Just in line we do with the literacy coaches and other coaches that we have out in the field, we're using that model and expanding that to include additional people to touch on each of these kind of key elements I just outlined for Mr. Suggs' question.
Looking to contract with folks to be digital learning coaches, if you will, and deploy them around the state. So that that was one of the things that I've got to commend John with, the whole thinking around loading everything onto the device. So all the student or teacher has to do is simply open it up. So there's nothing the districts are going to have to do. It's all prepared. And then we will then be looking to hire digital learning coaches with some of our monies to be able to deploy them like we do our literacy coaches. Same kind of an idea, but with an instructional focus as well as a technological focus. So.
Perfect. Okay, other comments or questions? Dr. Elam, Ms. Collins?
Nope, I have nothing.
Okay, well, I don't.
Dr. Dean, if I could just add one quick clarification. Dr. Gavin rightly pointed out the way I said something that has caused some confusion, that there already questions have come in regarding the November 1 sweeps. So I pulled the statute up. If I could just kind of read a quick sentence from that if on November 1st, 2020, there are unobligated monies in the fund from either us or the schools, then the department shall have discretion to distribute those funds for eligible expenditures as defined under ESSER. So it's not the ESSER fund per se, but the rules of ESSER. We would distribute the funds according to those rules for eligible expenditures. And how we're going to do that will depend on how much money there is, and we'll come back to you with more guidance on that.
Right.
We hope there's zero.
Absolutely, we hope there's zero.
Good, well, keep us posted, and as the application numbers finalize and the purchase orders follow there after the 1st and the 11th, just, those are critical numbers.
Yep, and we've encouraged all the districts to tune in tomorrow on the webinar, and we'll be back in touch with them today and a couple of different points to make sure that all the new revised, updated, final information is available to hopefully clarify the questions that are causing them to perhaps pause before we want to clear the path for them to apply to all 150, as you say, got the applications in time. So we're very excited to see that happen.
Yeah, and just before you go, you deserve so much praise. I know we're going on and on, but it's deserved. I mean, I'm telling y'all, I've sat through a lot of meetings with John and the team, and doesn't matter the question. He's on the spot. He knows the numbers in grisly detail. And I just, I think about you a lot, and I just, I'm proud of what you're doing. The board's proud of what you're doing. What you're doing for kids in this state are amazing. And I know there's some late nights, you just said, up here late last night, up here early this morning. And I'm just so grateful personally. But I know that I speak for the board. We're just so thankful for you and your staff. I know you've got other people you rely on, but don't think that it's not noticed. You're doing an awesome job.
Well, it's not me hardly at all. I mean, Dr. Dean, your support, your leadership, this board support, Dr. Wright's leadership, Felicia's team has been working closely with us. Pete and I have been sort of joined at the hip for quite a while now. Nathan's team has been instrumental in helping us think through how to address the educational side of this and helping us with reviewing the application. So I don't deserve any credit other than the work that the people that are working for me are helping pull forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll forego the rest of my report because I know we're kind of running late.
Okay.
And then, because it's just a series of meetings and presentations that I've been doing for the past month.
Okay. And I don't have a report as well. So, Omar, I know that we turned to you and you had some thoughts around what life as a student during the time of COVID's like. So we'd love to hear from you, an update, sir.
Yeah, so my district started school last Monday, and DeSoto County has been really good with the policies of like protecting students and teachers and administrators with like mask guidelines and social distancing policies. Of course, the virtual and on-site schooling is also very helpful with a large amount of our population staying at home. It does allow everyone to be even safer. But I would hope that other counties are doing just as great, but DeSoto County has been really good with making sure that every student is accounted for and that everyone is just staying safe, and especially with quarantining. At times it does seem very stifling, but at the end of the day, we all know that what we're doing is the best possible way to reach the outcome of 0 cases a day, at least in our county. So I know a lot of the students are like tired at the end of the day, and of course a lot of our opportunities are kind of stripped from us because of COVID and whatnot. But we know if we just continue this path that eventually everything will be back to normal. But that's pretty much how school's been going for me. What I'm really excited for concerning MDE is the finalist meetings this afternoon for the 2 representatives hoping to take the junior position. It has been kind of lonely this past couple months without Shelby, but yeah. But hopefully I can take whoever it is under my wing and along with the student advisory council, and we can hope to make some dialogue about COVID and what more there is to come. Because talking to friends and fellow students is opening, but when you're in the same situation as them, you don't really learn as much. But the student advisory council and my junior representative ought to have more dialogue that is new to me. So hopefully we can meet very soon and just talk about what could be different or what should be happening in certain counties. I hope that DeSoto County is setting a trailblazer for what to do, but I just hope that all the counties are staying safe for all populations.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Any comments or thoughts for Lamar? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I know we had at least 3 subcommittee meetings. Ms. Altman, accountability met yesterday, I believe?
They did. They met with a Teams meeting and discussed the Work Keys program and the implementation of Work Keys into the accountability system. And they came away with a recommendation that Work Keys would be given this year in the 2021 school year as a pilot program so they could gather data. There's no data out there. And then when monies were assured to pay for the testing, then it would be incorporated into the accountability model. And the next step is to determine how that will be incorporated into the accountability model. So they're making progress and it's moving along. So I think the next meeting, perhaps they will have a clearer discussion on incorporation. So that was about a 3.5-hour meeting yesterday.
Just saying.
Just saying.
That's a great update. So
yeah.
good to see that they're considering the impact of Work Keys. I know that was a legislative matter, and it's nice to, I'm pontificating way too much, but I've always said Section 37 of the code 30 years ago was one book about 2.5 inches, and now it's 2 volumes, probably 5 inches. So when we can, express the will of the people through policy and not laws, it's so much better and so much easier to maneuver as things evolve. So great work on that.
I think they'll bring forth something because they're rolling now, and I believe they'll have something by the end of the year. So.
And then we did academic achievement this morning.
We did academic achievement this morning, and Dr. Oakley updated you on the resource development that they're giving to districts. But we spent our time on our special schools, the residential schools, and their startup restart plans for the year. And of course, residential schools, the School for the Arts, Mississippi Math and Science, and both the schools for the blind and the deaf, all have to have different restart plans because they're dealing with the residential students. So they've been very thorough in their plans for, all the protocols for health and sanitation and feeding and all those things. And they have been very much in contact and collaborative with parents and making sure that parents understand and taking parent suggestions for getting their children back in school. So those plans were approved in our committee this morning.
Right. I think we're taking about we're not. Sorry? Just the second. Okay, I thought that was the number 6 on the separate item to okay. Yeah, I will get ahead of myself. Thank you for that. The legislative subcommittee met by Microsoft Teams yesterday afternoon, led by Pete. We discussed kind of, the current affairs of the legislature's approval of the school recognition program. I'll just say one comment on that. I don't want to get all into the school recognition program, but as I think we all know, that's a program that's awarded for achievement in arrears, meaning the 28 million or so was a function of the school year 18-19. And as we all know, we didn't take tests this last year, and so this will not be a program that has to, be considered by the legislature. And I would just say for, anybody listening, for those of you who are advocates for this program, I would be concerned. I think that, with the controversy that it caused and it not being funded again, we need to be very, watchful. If that's a program that you want to see continue in the next legislative session, you need to organize and advocate. Just my sense. We also talked about the budget situation, which is, now fully in order. We talked about the legislative budget recommendation process. Of course, we met in June and went through all that. So we also covered Senate Bill 3044 and House Bill 1788. Did I forget anything? Okay. All right. All right. Now we'll move on to our discussion items, and I'll ask
Excuse me, Dr. Dean. Yes, it's Karen Elam. Though the educator quality isn't really a subcommittee right now, and since I'm the only member, we can hardly call it a subcommittee, but I did want to give recognition to Dr. Murphy and Dr. Burson for meeting with me. It was the day before yesterday, I guess. Maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe it was that day. But anyway, I appreciate their time and keeping me up to date. And while we were together, we went over the 2 consent items that are applicable to the Office of Teaching and Leading. And then we updated each other on all that was going on within their respective fields.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry to have missed that. Any other, I don't think we had any other subcommittees. Get ahead. Okay, so we'll move into the action items. Number 1, I'll kind of set this up for you, Dr. Vanderford. This is for the approval of the State Board of Ed to allow specific school districts to operate for less than 180 days as required by the Mississippi Code following the governor's proclamation, Executive Order 1517, as a result of COVID on school districts during the 2020-2021 school year in accordance with the code. What this is about is last meeting, I think it was August 6th, we had a special called meeting right after our formal meeting to address the issue of the districts who had rescheduled their opening and pushed it back, whether by the governor's order or by their own volition. And we granted the optional 10-day waiver that's already allowed in law when there's an emergency declaration, which we're still constantly under. And so we granted it for those districts. And I think, again, there's probably some miscommunication and misinterpretation. It was presumed by all other districts not impacted by that they were out, that there was no way that they were going to get the 10 days, for the rest. That was never, ever the intent. I mean, we're very, I feel, again, I'm speaking for the board a little bit. I mean, we're listening. We want to lean forward. We want to make your life as easy as we possibly can within the powers that we have. And so it's not our first instinct is not no. It's like, what can we do to be helpful at the same time trying to ensure student accountability and everything else that comes along with education is being faithfully executed. So I just want to say, if there's ever an issue, let's talk through it. And this is what we did. And so I met with the Superintendent's Advisory Council, and several of them had said, we would feel better if we just went ahead and had those 10 days so that we can manage our schedules a little bit better, knowing that we're going to have some challenges probably. For example, we've heard in the news today, Biloxi has closed down the whole school. Maybe they're going virtual, I don't know. But the 4th grade in Lafayette County, the whole, so I know there's going to be more and more of that as all schools come online, I think by next Thursday, and maybe one other the week thereafter. But the point is that, we brought up here, and that's, Paul, I know I'm stealing your thunder, but there's 2 choices here. We can either grant everybody else the 10 days, or we can take them on a case-by-case basis. So I was part of that, and I was the one that pushed it, hard without a lot of conversation, and before, and I'm not apologetic about it. I think it was the right thing to do. I do feel bad that the communication somehow got out there, like now no other schools that's not what the law says. We don't have the ability to change the law. So, I don't know if you have additional information, but I just want to make sure everybody on the board had the context of what this action item is.
So, no, sir. I think you've covered everything. And I have just had several questions from some superintendents and staff regarding the inclement weather and the closures related, but that's not for us to address today. But that's a different section of the law that deals with the inclement weather. So this item is not focused on the section related to inclement weather. It's only focused on the section related to the state of an emergency, which does require board approval to waive up to 10 days.
So I think what we wanted to do was to bring this back for board consideration, and so that the districts have clarity, and that's the reason you identified basically options to vote on. Is to provide the 10-day waiver to all local school districts would be option 1, and option 2 would be to provide the 10-day waiver to districts on a case-by-case basis, and then that will clarify it then for all districts in the state.
Okay, questions or discussion from board members?
If we make it, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask if we give all the districts the 10-day option, they still have a choice to choose if they use it or not. So why wouldn't we just, is that, am I saying that right or no?
Yeah, you're saying it absolutely right. And this is just, you know, as they deal, I'm trying so hard not to advocate for a position, but as they're dealing with challenges, you know, that confront them, they won't have to wait until the next State Board of Education meeting to ask for the 10 days. We're giving it to them in advance, recognizing that there's a lot of challenges that they're going to face. And again, this is not to do with inclement weather. This is COVID related.
Right.
By dropping 10 days off the end of the year.
How do we, can I ask another question? And again, this is more of an education question for me. If we grant the 10 days, what's to stop a district from taking, if they don't need the 10 days, they take 10 days off at the end or something?
The answer to Mr. Suggs' question is in the board item, in the last paragraph on page 1 of the backup. Around the criteria that the board set last month. The decision was to reduce the calendar, last sentence calendar, by up to 10 days is a local district decision. It's not a requirement of districts, and that it would not allow the waiver approved by the board on August the 6th to not allow districts to maintain their original start date and reduce the number of school days later in the school year. So that was the action that the board took last month. That was clear that if you don't need the 10 days, you just can't take those 10 days off the end of the calendar year.
I'm clear. So let's say you're you know, you got lucky, you didn't have to face, you know, a huge outbreak, and it's towards the end of the year. I mean, I think we need to be clear on this policy that there has to be some, you know, reporting as to why that you closed down, and it has to be COVID related. Because like you said, Sean, at the end of the year, you didn't need them. So you're just like, all right, school's out. Congratulations, you got 2 weeks. That's not what this is about. This is really trying to enable and empower local school leadership to have maximum flexibility as they're dealing. They might need 2 days here and there and just deal with it without having to. So that's all.
Understand.
Well, I was going to say that are you ready for a motion?
Well, if anybody, Dr. Kelly or Dr. Elam, I don't want to. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I would move that we grant districts up to 10 days, knowing that they don't have to take all 10 days because we're encouraging them to go to school, but going ahead and granting them up to 10 days. It's kind of a long motion, but if they have to report as need basis, that's a lot of paperwork for the department, and it puts them on, maybe a delayed approval. So I say up to 10 days, COVID related.
Is that a good motion?
Well, it's kind of around the world, but anyway, you get the gist.
Provide up to 10 days.
Second the motion.
Hang on a second. Option to all local school districts. Is it the board's wish to include the same provision? It does not permit districts to reduce the number of school days later in the school year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and it's got to be COVID related. So that the COVID related takes care of that. Because if it's June 1st and you didn't take any, you're not dealing with COVID in June or whatever, but you don't get them as a bonus. It's only throughout the course of the year. Yeah, so that's the motion. Dr. Elam had a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And I'll just say before we move on to the second action item, I asked how many people were watching 153, so I hope some of those are superintendents. I really want folks to see this department as, a partner. And, the first step is not no, it's how do we get to yes? And when we can, we will. But obviously we have, laws and rules and, regulations we have to follow. But in this instance, I want this to be an illustration of how we hear you. We're your partner. We want to make life as easy as possible in a very critical time in our state's history. So let that be remembered by everybody. All right, moving on to action item 2, approval of State Board of Ed to suspend strict compliance with specific state statutes and State Board education policy for the upcoming year following Governor Reed's proclamation of state of emergency as a result of COVID on school districts in accordance with Mississippi Code sections. Dr. Vanderford.
So this appears to be what is a standing board item since March of 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic. And we're bringing these to you on a case-by-case basis. But this is an item that we would like to request a rule suspension on in accordance with 37.7.321.2, which requires any person employed by a school board as a security guard or a school resource officer or any other position that has such powers as a peace officer, a minimum of 2 years to meet the required training as set forth by the Standards Board of Training and the State Board of Education. So due to the impact and the lack of training opportunities, we do have individuals that were employed during the 2019-2020 school year and may be employed during the 2020-2021 school year that may not be able to meet those requirements in 2 years. So we're asking the board to grant an additional 1 year suspension of that rule and give them the extension to allow them 3 years rather than 2 to complete that training.
Got it. It's pretty straightforward. It's just some flexibility on our regulations. Any additional comments or questions? Under the Office of Chief County Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 2?
This is Sean, so moved.
John.
Karen Elam, second.
I'll let you have it, Ms. Elam.
Dr. Elam with the second. Any additional discussion? Hear none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Just for the record, they all need to be audible when they vote.
Okay, yeah. So whenever because this is recorded and when we ask for approval of the motion, if you can just get off mute and verbally affirm, that would be appreciated. All right, under item 3, let's see here. All right, establish Mississippi Administrative Code 7-3, 9.2, State Board Policy Chapter 9, reporting attendance for virtual learning. This has cleared the APA process. We talked about this, I think, 2 meetings ago in July. Dr. Vanderford.
So as Dr. Dean stated, on July 16th, the board approved a temporary rule to establish this board policy for reporting attendance for virtual learning that would provide districts guidance on how to report students that were engaged in instruction, whether through the traditional, the hybrid, or a virtual model. The APA process was open through August the 17th of 2020, and no public comments were received, so we're asking final approval of this policy from the board today.
Just high level, tell us how you do virtual school attendance or hybrid.
So the districts, the students are required to check in with the district. So each local district has their own policy as to how they're reporting attendance and tracking students and student progress if they're on the hybrid or virtual learning. So even if they're having packets, they still have a process for how they ensure that the students are completing the work and completing it on time. And if the students do so, then they are eligible to be recorded and count that student present.
We gave them guidance on how to do
yes, that. Yes, that's the entire policy.
Right, the entire policy is guidance. If it's virtual, then this is how you log it in. If it's hybrid, this is how you log it in. If it's in person, it's the same way we've always done it. So that went out for APA and has come back. So.
But the district policies vary based on their LMS systems and whether they have one or not, or whether they're having to do packets.
Plan too, to pick up on that point, is we realized when we went into this digital learning plan that not everybody had a learning management system. And this will now give everybody a learning management system and the ability to know when kids log on to their computers and are engaged. So, and that's going to be data that we're going to be collecting as well.
Yep. So that good. I mean, and this is, you know, in the here and now, we're really focused on virtual attendance, but obviously, you know, in years to come, I mean, I think this is you know, as I said before, the start of a accountability model around distance learning. So any other questions or comments? The Office of Chief Accountability Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 3?
John Kelly, I move approval of item 3.
There's a motion, second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Altman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Dr. Oakley, number 4, action item approved by the State Board of Ed to suspend strict compliance with Mississippi Code Section State Board Policy in the 2021 school year following the governor's proclamation state of emergency result of COVID on school districts during the spring of 2020 in accordance with the code. Dr. Oakley.
Thank you. I will not reread the code to you. In short, this item is related to gifted education. Within our gifted regs, we require 240 minutes of gifted instruction per week for our students who are served in those programs. Given that the board has taken action to allow for districts to serve students with a reduced time during each school day, we're asking for a similar reduction in the number of minutes required for gifted education programs to reduce from 240 to 150 minutes per week of gifted instructional programming. We think this will give them some flexibility within their schedule for their teachers, and at the same time allow for students to still have a meaningful experience in those classrooms.
Okay. Again, more flexibility. Is there any questions for Dr. Oakley? Comment? Okay. Hearing none, under the Office of Chief Academic Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 4?
Karen Elam, so moved.
This is Sean, second.
Well, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hear none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Also, Dr. Oakley, action item 5, approval by the State Board to suspend strict compliance with Mississippi Code sections and State Board policy for the upcoming school year following the governor's proclamation of state of emergency as a result of the impact of COVID on school districts. Dr. Oakley.
Thank you. This item is related to the kindergarten readiness assessment as well as the early literacy and numeracy screeners that are required within state law. Currently, that timeline is set at 30 days, with 30 school days for the administration of those. We're requesting an extension to 45 school days from the start of the school year for those districts that are starting depending on when they start. It'll give them a full 9 weeks, essentially, of school to get those students tested in kindergarten readiness and screened. We have already put out some guidance to districts on both of these assessment series around virtual screening and small group screening to allow for some flexibility there. But given the fact that in some cases they're testing in small groups, we wanted to afford them the opportunity to have a little bit longer to get these screeners completed. We also, as a part of this, are requesting a waiver of the requirements to meet and document good cause exemption under the Literacy-Based Promotion Act for those students that were in 3rd grade last year promoting to 4th grade this year, given that they didn't necessarily have an opportunity to document that last spring when we shifted immediately to virtual learning. The other piece of this related to literacy-based promotion is the reporting requirement. Because there were no exams or assessments given last spring, it's not feasible for us to do a public reporting of a 3rd grade assessment that didn't take place. So we're requesting a waiver of the timeline for the screeners and kindergarten readiness, the good cause exemption documentation for last year, as well as the reporting requirements under literacy-based promotion.
When are those tests given?
They're given 4th 9 weeks. It's the math exam at the end of the year.
The end of the year?
The end of year reading portion of the 3rd grade.
3rd grade. So I'm, stating the obvious, but we'll be dealing with this throughout the entire school year. But I've had so many questions about tests, and I'm just here to say, just given my sense and conversation, not only with board members, but some political leadership. The sense is that we need to know where we are. So all this talk about no tests, I don't. We're concerned about the step 2 of that on the accountability side. We're absolutely having those conversations, but I just think people need to be prepared to give tests just to see how bad the damage is. Hopefully that's not. I'm not a pessimistic person. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's wonderful, but I know months out of school is going to take its toll. But hopefully we can get it back. So, is there any questions or conversations, discussions for Dr. Oakley on this, number 5? All right, hearing none, under the Office of Chief Academic Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 5?
John Kelly, I so move.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Karen Elam, second.
Motion and second, any additional discussion? Hear none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Our last one before we get to Felicia is action item 6, approval of the temporary rule to begin the APA process for state board school calendar approval and modification. Dr. Oakley.
So this is the one you referenced earlier that is related to special schools. So typically the special schools bring forward a calendar to the board in the summer for the upcoming school year, their academic calendar, and the board approves that. In keeping with this trend of flexibility, what we're asking for is the ability for these schools in an emergency or natural disaster to work directly with Dr. Wright or her designee, state superintendent or designee, to make a modification to that calendar and then bring that forward at the next board meeting. We saw that need over the last several weeks as the governor issued his executive order, and as our schools across the state were tracking on caseloads and infections within their communities and looking at the need to potentially delay the start of school. And so this would allow the schools to make that modification and then bring the adjusted calendar forward for ratification by the board at the next meeting.
All right, any thoughts or questions? Okay, under the Office of Chief Academic Officer, do I have a motion to approve item number 6?
So move.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
So Sean Suggs, second.
Second from Mr. Suggs. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Oakley. Dr. Gavin, there's several contracts that we need to approve. I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Dean and board, we do have several contracts. The first two coming before you for modification. Contract item 7A is a modification to extend the terms as well as the funding with Hanover Research Council to provide the labor analysis that we need here at the department. So we're asking for approval for that modification to extend it for 1 year.
This is the only one I have a question on, and I know it's a sole source, and I know it's a mod. What's the procurement law say? Because now it went from 43 to 45 and we're at 88. I've talked to Hanover. I know what they're doing. I like what they're doing. This is not a concern about them, but it's like makes me feel good about the procurement law here because of sole source. It's something, I don't know what the numbers are, but there's some number. And then when you start adding multiple contracts together, it crosses over a number, and just want to ensure we're following the procurement law.
We posted this last year when we put it out initially, and we got no other response to it. My
question though is on the increase. So that if there's we can do what's the number in which, I know we competed this. Okay, so under, we don't have to recompete it if it crosses over $50,000. I mean, what's to keep this from, it was sole source, but it was put out there as an RFP and there was only one response.
So let me make sure I'm understanding your question. As a board, that's why we're bringing it to the board. If it's over $50,000, the board has to approve it.
So I know. Now we took something that was less than 50,000, okay, and that was awarded the current contract at 43,000, right? And then we gave them a modification. Now we're above 50,000. So we have to approve that. But the first process that was competed. So I guess if you know that you're a big company and you look at a contract and it's $40,000, like that's too small. I'll do it for 100. And now it's kind of close to that. I mean, I want to know more about the procurement law. That how many times can we plus it up before, is there any law that
That I'm actually not certain about, but when we did it last year, we did put it out for bid and we got no response in terms of challenging their ability to be sole source. So we did not do that again this year. I don't believe, Dr. Oakley, no, we did not.
Yes, when I hear sole source, that means there was not a competition. that means we awarded it. But there was an RFP that was put out that no one responded to the RFP but Hanover.
And no one challenged them saying that, hey, we can do that work. So we left it as sole source this year.
When there's a sole source, they have to publish it for, I believe, 14 days.
Yes.
For someone to protest.
Yes.
Correct.
And we did that last year.
It was not a competitive RFP originally. And can someone protest the mod?
That I do not know.
Like I said, I know what this is about. I've had conversations with them. I think they're doing fantastic work. I just think that this is one of those areas that gets a little, has some, buzz on it, because when we modify contracts over and over and over again, if the original opportunity looked big enough, maybe other companies would have, jumped in on it.
Yeah, it wasn't a request for proposal. We actually just posted it as a sole source, basically asking anyone if they can do the work, not necessarily tied to the dollar amount. Can you provide this scope of work? And no one challenged, saying that they challenged the ability of Hanover to be sole source. Now, if you want us to post it again, we can take it back.
If you're comfortable with it, we can pull it and post it.
I just want to make sure we're following the law. I mean, I have no problem with,
We all.
Yeah, but we have in the past had issues with doing mods that got, bigger and bigger and bigger, and it, became an issue. So I just want to make sure we don't go down that trail again.
We can certainly pull it and post it again as sole source and see if we get a response.
Just to, ensure that the public has a full awareness of what we're doing. We're following going to the 10th mile even, just to ensure that we're, full disclosure on that. So that, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay? Please move on.
Okay. Action item D is a modification with Teachstone. They provide training and commodities to the department related to the Office of Early Childhood, pre-K through 3rd grade. And that is a modification as well. Okay. Action item 7C is a contract with Management Service for Education Data, and that was a sole source through ITS. Action item 7D, this is related to Senate Bill 3044. It's to award two contracts to zero cost to the department, but this is for the school district. And the awarded vendors are Infrastructure, which has the Canvas platform, and Power School has Schoology. So again, this is related to Senate Bill 3044, the EDLA Act.
I just have to ask the question, no Mississippi companies applied, or was this a competitive RFP? Request for quote.
So these are like software licenses, so for the schools that have Canvas or have, which is from Instructional or Schoology, this is just to extend those licenses to the students who are, who aren't currently covered by their digital learning program. So these are just simply an extension to make sure that all the districts
employment contract with our interim superintendent of the Knoxville County School District. That's Mr. Rob Barnett, to extend that employment contract for 1 year through the current school year.
All right.
Okay, and that concludes the contract.
Any additional comments or questions? So when we ask for the motion on A, is that, can we get a motion contingent on there not being a protest or having to go to proposal?
I would advise that you pull it from.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down. I thought we'd just pull it and do it again.
Roger that. Yep. Under the Office of Chief Operation Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 7B, 7C, 7D, and 7E?
And a motion to pull A.
Sorry?
And a motion.
Yeah, so that, included in that motion would be to pull A.
I move for approval that we approve items B through E and remove item A.
Righty. That's the motion. Can I get a second?
Karen Elam, second.
Any additional discussion? Hear none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All righty. Thank you all. Motion carries. All right, let's see, under 8, approval of MDE grant awards, Dr. Gavin.
Okay, thank you. We have one grant coming before the board for approval, and it is to modify our early learning collaborative grants to our pre-kindergarten programs based on our funding this year from House Bill 1700.
Okay. Any questions on this amendment to the grant? All right. Under Chief Operations Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 8A?
This is Sean, so moved.
Is there a second?
John Kelly, second.
Any further discussion? Hear none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, motion carries. John Freeman, number 9, action item, approval to integrate $4 million of ESSER funds to support distance learning and mitigate against higher than anticipated costs of Windows devices.
Sounds so dramatic. So it's good to see you guys again. So in this proposal, we were trying to find a way to address the concerns we discussed earlier that the districts have had as they approach the precipice of submitting their applications and insurances and so forth for the digital learning plan. One issue that arose was that when the final contract was awarded, the price of the Windows devices was higher than we had anticipated by a meaningful amount of money. And so in discussions with Dr. Wright and ELT, we were working on how to find a way to try to mitigate against that increased price. And what we are proposing is to spend $4 million out of the state's ESSER funds to support the pricing by allocating additional funds into the district's pot of money from the state to offset some of that increased cost. How we actually grant that out, we want to bring that methodology back to you later, but as we give the final allocations to the districts tonight, we want to make sure that we could factor that in so that they do the final price before they submit their application.
So again, this is to me like a really big deal. So and that we have a fix for it. The Windows devices were, let's just say they were on average $600, what we projected. When the final numbers came in, they were $750. And in anticipation of, that effect on the budget, the state superintendent has discretionary funds that we're freeing up to offset that cost. I just think that's an awesome thing. I mean, that money was already designated for professional development and other, strategies around the distance learning effort, but to be able to help those districts with, that unanticipated cost, I just think that's an awesome move. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, under the Office of Chief Information Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 9?
John Kelly, I move approval of the item.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, all of them. This is such enthusiasm.
It's so lonely here. You want to know the truth? I feel like I'm a voice in the wilderness.
All right, any further discussion? Here none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We'll move to the consent agenda now. All consent items are action items which require a vote unless otherwise noted. Any additional questions? If not hearing any under the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J?
Karen Elam, so moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we'll move to the consideration of executive session.
I move that the board consider making a closed determination of the need to go into executive session.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
This is Sean, second.
There's a motion with a second to go into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we're going to please clear the boardroom.
The board has voted to go into the executive session for the following reasons. Discussion of discrete personnel matters in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated section 254174A and K related to the approval of the appointment of an Education Bureau Director 2 to serve as the Director of Internal Audit within the Office of Educational Accountability, the approval of the appointment of an Education Bureau Director 2 to serve as the Principal at the Mississippi School for the Blind, the approval of the appointment of an Education Bureau Director 2 to serve as MCAP Administrator within the Office of Grant Management, the approval of the appointment of an Education Bureau Director 2 to serve as the Director of Infrastructure within the Office of Technology and Strategic Services, and the approval of the appointment of an Education Bureau Manager to serve as the Director of Federal Programs.
Yep. Then we need a motion to come out. Okay. During executive session, the board took the following actions. We appointed Catherine Landrum as Director of Internal Audit within the Office of Education and Accountability. We appointed Ed Spann to serve as principal at the Mississippi School for the Blind. We appointed Maria Jackson to serve as MCAPS Administrator within the Office of Grants Management. We appointed John Hartley to serve as Director of Infrastructure within the Office of Technology and Strategic Services. And finally, we appointed Judy Nelson to serve as Director of Federal Programs. Okay, any meetings to, I don't think there's any meetings to report on or none coming up. I will say before we talk about other business, we do have a special called session at 1 o'clock, that's 55 minutes, for the purposes of interviewing and appointing our student representative. We also need to note that the September board meeting will be held on September 24th, 2020 at the Central High School building here, starting at 10 a.m. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, before you adjourn, are we using the same link at 1 o'clock?
Yes, sir. Yeah, stay on or reconnect. It's the same link. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Okay. If not, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sean, so moved.
Sean, second.
Okay, with the motion from Ms. Altman and the second from Mr. Suggs. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. See you in 55 minutes.